Good morning, friends. That's my hammer dulcimer setup when I've got something going on for hammer dulcimers. Today, we are talking about woodshedding. What is woodshedding? Woodshedding in this case, let me just make sure I have the chat enabled. Let's see if it will enable today, because in the past I had some issues with that. Yeah, okay. It doesn't appear to be enabled. Okay. Woodshedding is when you take it's a term that gets used in music. It's what happens when you take a difficult piece. You have a piece that's difficult, you want to work on, you want to repeat, you want to go over and over again, and you don't want to be thinking about everybody's reaction to going over and over again. Oops. Okay, I just ended up in the wrong new tab. So one of the things that I experience when I'm working on something, if I feel self-conscious about it if other people are around. And we're in this time when everybody's around the house all the time, it can be very difficult to find the space in which to work, in which you can practice without worrying about someone listening over your shoulder and maybe giving you some critique or response to what you've been playing. I had one student once who would play in his music room, and his wife would sit out in the living room, and that was the only way it worked for him. He had to pretend she wasn't there. He could close the door, whatever. She enjoyed the music. She thoroughly enjoyed that he was playing the music, and she would tell him, oh, it sounded so nice. And then he would be a little embarrassed because he would forget that she was listening. He would get into the music so much. But there are people who live with people who are critical. And so that can be difficult. So sometimes woodshedding is just to get away by yourself, where you can just play and let the music suck you into it. But there's another strategic time, and that's when you have something particular that you're working on. And you have a place in the music that just is messing you up. You can't quite seem to get past that. I'm going to see if I have one of those that I can demonstrate here. It's a piece I've just been reassigned to a new part in the dulcimer orchestra, and it's a part that I wrote, so it should not give me this problem. But you know how that is. Sometimes you write parts that are too, well, maybe you don't know, but I know. Sometimes I write parts that I can't play, yet. So let me find this one here. Oh, yeah, it's a Chopin. Okay. Oh, that's not it. And that's set now too. Okay. I wonder if it's been. Well, maybe I won't show you that part, because so far I'm not finding the right music. Oh, let's look at this one instead. So there are parts that are maybe a little more difficult for us. And on a mountain dulcimer, sometimes those parts are the ones that go up into the expensive frets. So in this particular piece, The Funeral March of a Marionette by Charles Gounod. Getting the right tuning first. So I have to do that whole staccato thing. That's one thing to work on. But there's some string things I'm going to have to work on going back here. But now, when I get in this higher octave, I'm fret 10. It's the same thing I did down here. So when I work on it here, I can apply it up here. But oh boy, these frets are skinnier. They're closer to each other. They're a little more challenging. And it's just a different part. So I've identified that I've got a couple of places in this one that I'm going to have to take to the woodshed. And that means when I find that place that's not next to the house, it's a metaphor. Woodshed is the place where you store the wood away from the house. So when the termites come up from the ground and eat into the wood, they don't also eat into your house. That's why you don't stack your wood against your house, because it draws them to your foundation, or to your sill plate anyway. So I would take this and say, okay, it's time for me. I have to, this part, that part's not so hard. So I'm repeating this over and over and over again because, and then I'm going to shift. And one of the things I noticed by doing this, I've got this one part. What I'm doing is I've got 3 fingers. I just move and do it again. I move and do it again. Oh, by repeating these over and over again, I start to say, I don't have to learn everything over again. So by focusing on this, instead of just seeing a slew of numbers and notes that are going past, I'm discovering that there's a trick for me to figure out how I might be able to I don't want to say attack, but approach this so that I can actually play it smoothly. Okay, now that's not so clean. I gotta. And the fact that I have to play these staccato actually helps me. So as I'm reading this, I'm saying, okay, I've got all this to do. I've got to get up into this place. There's this part that I need to really woodshed. That other part, pretty easy, but this part, a little tricky. And then I get back to what I did before. So now I've identified the piece that I need to do, and I can work on that. I can do these. I can break it down to these little components. I can repeat them many times. Then I can put them together. So I have my transitions. Okay, my transition from there to not quite clean yet. Now, one of the things I have to get over is my intolerance of my errors. Because when we make mistakes and we don't like them, it's tempting to try to just ignore them and just run right by them and not paying attention, not do anything about them at all. So because I don't have anybody listening, an extra ear that I am worried about being critical, and I know I have my own critical ear here, what I'm doing is taking myself away where I can use that little person with the clipboard I've talked about before. Please help me now. Can you give me some coaching? Nope, that wasn't it. Nope, that wasn't it. So I've identified this part. What am I doing? I'm repeating. I read some research this week that was saying if you want something to stick in terms of neuroplasticity, where we're changing the shape of our brain, rewiring our circuitry and with muscle movement, that you have to do something, like 400 times before it actually happens, unless you're playing. If you're playing, those changes and those connections happen a lot faster. And it might have something to do with the endorphins and things like that. I don't know. I don't understand all the pieces of the science behind it, but the observation is, if it's a task that you're drudging through, that's one thing. But if you are enjoying it, if you have some level of amusement and some possibility of satisfaction with it, it can be a shorter time of repetition. So that's why I always remind us that we don't work music, we play music. And what I'm doing, though, even though I've heard people say, I don't want to work that hard, I just want to play my music. And maybe this type of piece, maybe this music that you have that is a real struggle for you, isn't going to be that thing. It's not going to bring you the joy. You don't like playing it. Why are you playing it? Well, in this case, it's part of the dulcimer orchestra, and it's a part that needs to be played. And I want to be part of the ensemble, the group. And so I'll play it because I want to help the group. So it may not be for my personal enrichment enjoyment. It's because I want to help the group. And then when the group does that, then I feel better about it. So it's kind of a one step away. But noticing that's all a little sloppy. The first thing is, I noticed that I don't necessarily like the tone. It's not as pleasing to me, but the note has to be played. And after I play that one, I want to make sure that I have good tone with all of these other ones in these skinny frets. And depending on the size of your instrument, these frets may be even tinier if you have a shorter variable string length. But the point is, I'm practicing the thing that I don't like. I'm practicing the thing that's hard because I don't want it to remain hard. Steve Schneider once wrote an article in Dulcimer Players News about the fact that when you break a bone, when it heals back together, if it's set right, the place where it broke is now stronger than the other parts of the arm. I'm picking an arm now. If you break your arm here and the bone is set properly and it heals, when it heals, the part that was originally broken is now stronger than the parts on the either side of it. And he said, use that as an example or an idea for your music. If you have a part in your music that's broken and you fix that part, you set it correctly, you let it heal, what happens to your overall piece when what used to be the weakest is now the strongest part of your piece? Well, sometimes I've experienced that reveals other weak spots that I can now pay attention to, or the whole piece is just elevated now because what used to be weak is now strong. And that brings, it's like the rising tide lifts all the boats. Now, the strategy for when I'm in the woodshedding time is I want to get better at what I'm doing. And I use I bring from my experience of learning bagpipes. I was swapping lessons with the bagpipe instructor. She wanted to play mountain dulcimer. I wanted to play bagpipes. And so she'd come over and we'd take turns. We'd do one lesson and do the other lesson. And at one point when I was trying to do some of the I was learning some of the ornaments that are a part of bagpiping, like grips and throws and burls and I'm forgetting the other ones right now, but those take a lot of fancy fingering things that are unusual, and it's not what I imagine I'm thinking, and it looks like a lot of dense little things on the page, and so it looks difficult. So there's a lot that goes into that. And I would try to do these. I'd play one and not get it right, and I'd be so disappointed. And so at one point, she just stopped me and she said, "My bagpipe instructor is a competitive bagpiper who wins contests. And he told me, you need to do your exercises 100 times without an error." And she could see my jaw, my eyes, 100 times without an error. And he would tell her, go back. If you make an error, go back and start again. And I'm thinking, I don't have enough time in my life for this. She said, I don't want you to do it 100 times. I just want you to do it 20. And I looked at her as if she had said infinity. It seemed like this was going to be forever impossible. I was just not going to be able to do it. But there was something magical in that assignment. Because when I tried to play this little passage, right there, it broke up, and I would just be frustrated because it wasn't as clean as I wanted it. But when I aimed for 20 times, let's see what happens. 1, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, some of them are starting to get a little bit sloppier than they did at the beginning. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, Now, if I would go back and watch a recording of what I just did and evaluate and say, this was strong, this one was weak, this one needed this, and tally them up, when I couldn't do one, when I aimed for 20, I think I got about 7, 8, or 9 in there that I was really pleased with. And others that I had, there's a wobbly part here, something there. But when I couldn't do one, but when I aimed for a bigger number, I got almost half of them. The more times, good morning, Talon. The more times that I repeat what I'm doing, I'm actually loading it into my fingers as muscle memory. But I'm also giving myself the ability to let go of my mistakes and get better. And where I couldn't do one, now 100% of the time I couldn't do one, 50% of the time I could do it right. And as I do it again and again, now maybe it's 75% of the time, maybe it's 80% of the time. And I gradually, because of creating an insane number of repetitions, I take my attention off of every little weebly thing that happens, and I actually get better. The piece, that part improves. So that was really an important lesson for me to learn from that instructor about the usefulness of woodshedding. And Talon, you were asking, yeah, you wanted to see what I was doing. Okay. Here's what I was doing. Good point. So what I was doing is working on this little piece that is a challenge area in the piece, the Funeral March of the Marionette, for the Mountain Dulcimer Orchestra, or the Dulcimer Orchestra, the Berkeley Dulcimer Orchestra is working on this piece. And it's an arrangement I did for this season, but we didn't get to play it because we didn't have our recital. So we're doing some other things instead. And this is one we're hoping to do later this fall. But because I aimed for this big number of repetitions, I actually improved my chances of getting it right when it's time to play it in the real life situation. So the steps are, say I need to go to the woodshed. I need to take this piece to the woodshed. I need to take it where no one's looking over my shoulder. I don't have that critical eye or ear that's paying attention. I can just focus on it and use my critical eye or ear. Once I've identified the space, I work on it, and I notice some things about it. Like the first thing I noticed, that little pattern happens there, happens here. So it's the same pattern 3 times, just starting in a new place. And if I use my 3 fingers as a little unit, I just know that I need to start at 10, I need to start at 12, I need to start at 14. And then the other thing is the coming back down. I've made my observations, which now make it a little more accessible to me. Then I took it out and I played it, but I didn't just try to do it once, because every time I tried to do it once, I did not do it well. But when I repeated, I aimed for 20 times, 20 repetitions. And out of that 20, I got maybe 7 to 9 that I'm happy with, which means I improved my chances of getting it right from 0 out of 100 to about 40, 50% out of 100. Now that's a lot better in just one short session. But now that I've done that, I've got to figure out how to stitch that back into the piece that I'm working on. So one way is to go back one measure before that and see if I can get into it from the measure beforehand and kind of then spackle over. It's like the strongest way to make, you got 2 boards, you got 2 4-foot boards, but you need 1 6-foot board. Cutting 2 feet off of one and adding it is not going to be strong, but overlapping them will be a whole lot stronger. And then you can get your 6-foot length out of what you need by giving a good overlap. What I'm doing is going back and picking up the measure before, but I also have to think about what comes after this. So D, 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 1, D, 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 D. So that's the next thing that happens. I'm at letter E in this particular piece of music, and I know that I have to go on to that phrase that I'm already familiar with, because so now I've put it back in and I practice I'm in the woodshed still, and I practice the transitions to get into the difficult piece and out of the difficult piece. Now maybe I can go back to the beginning and play the whole thing. So woodshedding is that spotlight focus on the thing that is your challenge. Finding a way to do it without being concerned about other people's reaction to what you're doing, because there's going to be a lot of repetition. If you're in a house where what you're doing is loud and other people are listening, they may not want to hear it. They may start saying, "Can you play the rest of the song?" It's particularly difficult when we're, quarantined like many of us are. But if you can find a room in the house that could be your woodshed, you can find your back stoop, you can take a chair and go sit out at the end in your yard. Any place where you can just get away and focus on this one little thing, it's going to be a good strategy that will help you as you work through your music. Now, Talon, you're here in Facebook. Do you have any experiences with woodshedding, positive or negative, or tips that you might want to share? And I'll just add, it doesn't matter what instrument. I was using the mountain dulcimer today because there were two pieces that I was thinking about, or places that I wanted to think about, and that was just one of them. I do have to acknowledge that there is another connotation that goes along with the term woodshedding. Take them out to the woodshed. For some people, it's a punishment place. It's where discipline was administered out away from everybody else. And that's not what I'm meaning here. Aha. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining. You found it. We're talking about woodshedding, and I demonstrated the practice of taking a piece that's difficult out of the piece you're working on and repeating it many times. And Talon saying you've done it like 3 or 4. I'd encourage you to just take something that's really difficult and try for that 20 and see if your results don't mimic what I did. But we're not taking the tune out to beat it up. We're just trying to improve it by giving it a chance for us to shave off the rough edges, or sand down the corners. Aha, you were on Vimeo. Okay. I could not get the chat to work today, Jim. I don't know what's going on with that. That does sound like what you would say. There is a danger with that. I mean, I know you're being humorous here, but the danger that comes with doing that is that the piece you're working on can become mechanical and lose its musicality, which is why you always have to work at getting it back into the tune after it's been focused on. So that's not just, you do want your fingers to have the pattern in them so that you're not thinking about everything you do, and it can be much smoother without the brain having to sign off on every note. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. No, that's wrong. Adjust. Because that's what really causes us to stumble. Oh, you're welcome. And we don't need the stumbling, do we? We want to play smoothly, but we also want to play musically. So when you've taken it out and put it back in and smoothed it over, make sure you go back and use all the expression that would have been there before. Sometimes the pieces we're playing are the only reason we need it is because the thing goes fast. And the musicality is little more than making sure everything flows. But especially if you're working on a piece that has some accents that are needed or some articulations, if you've done this because you needed the slides and the bends, excuse me, the hammer-ons and pull-offs, if that's why you were taking it to the woodshed to do those things, they're going to be there. But the musicality piece about dynamics and tempo and all those things are what need to make their appearance or make their way back into the piece. Anyway, I commend this practice to you. And if you have, I do have, well, let me say this. The goal of the woodshed is to be able to do the repetition in a way that fixes the problems and helps you cement the solution. When we don't do the woodshedding, the experience I've seen with a lot of students is they'll get to the place they mess up, they'll stop, and they'll work on fixing the thing they mess up. They go back to the beginning, they play, and they mess up in the exact same space. And what actually happens is they end up practicing their mistakes. They can never get past them because they're so focused on trying to fix things in context. And that's why the woodshed is much more valuable for that kind of fixing, because the other thing that can happen, oh, error, gotta fix, error, gotta fix, error, gotta fix, is that you never actually absorb the flow of the piece of music you're trying to play, because you get so good at saying, oh, those notes aren't right. And usually it's not timing that we're having a problem with when we're approaching it in this way. It's the tones aren't right. And so we're trying to fix that note. And I've one student who's a hammered player who then, when the wrong note is hit, goes and plays the right note 10 times. And it doesn't seem and which could be fine, but my observation is that does not seem to help the accurate note show up later. That would be a type of mini woodshed where you're just hitting a note, but it's not in context. It doesn't change anything. The next time we go through, I'm going to hear that same note 10 times because the same error is going to be produced. So woodshedding takes it out of the context and lets us focus on it, bring it back. And then when it's back, do not stop. Go right through it. Play it as if it's the live situation. Try to see if you can play through the error and then come back. Say, okay, we need some more woodshedding time on that. Then go work on it, bring it back, paper the corner, or spackle over the edges, do the, make your overlap so that it's a smooth thing, and see if it isn't better. Another thing, and this can be very difficult, is to record a baseline. When you're first learning the piece, record a baseline recording of you playing through it. One of the things this does is desensitize you to recording, because if your experience is like many, many, many other people's experience, when you do it wrong, you will be so hyper vigilant about that when it's time to play hit the button record, you'll play it wrong, and then you'll be upset with yourself, and you'll have an example of yourself playing it wrong and being upset with yourself. But if you can get used to starting that record button and playing and just play the music and accepting whatever's there, it can be a useful tool for comparison and learning. It can also be, I call it a baseline, because if you do that at the beginning and then listen to it after you've been playing in a while, and then do another recording after you've been playing a while, you'll have points of comparison. And it's easy when we're working on something to forget that we once could never do it. And in the middle of it, we may not be able to do it the way we want to do it, but we're doing it better than when we couldn't do it at all. And that point of comparison, that's the capacity building that I think is so important for music education, building our capacity, because we can do something and we can also improve on something we can do. There is that goal over there that we may or may not reach this week, next week, in a month, in a year, in a lifetime. Pete Seeger was quoted as saying to his grandson Tao, so you want to be a musician. That means you need to be prepared to be dissatisfied for the rest of your life. And the point he was making is, as we reach for the goal, we rarely reach it, but we keep reaching, and that makes us improve. So woodshedding is a strategy on the way to improvement and reaching the goal, reaching for the goal. Well, that's what I have for us today. And it looks like being here on Facebook is the more reliable way to comment and participate, because the Vimeo chat's not working for some reason. I've got to find out from them what's going on. But I'll be here again next week. We're going to start looking at some different strategies for learning new tunes. Each week we'll look at, there is the by eye, where we read it, by ear, where we hear it, and the by doing it, just by watching and copying, And that's what we'll be doing for the next few weeks. So I encourage you to, I welcome you to come back and join me then. And if you have, as always, any questions, you can write to me at steve@dulcimercrossing.com. Let me put that in the chat here. Hey, Dwayne. And any learnings or things? Dwayne, we've been talking about woodshedding. To improve the rough spots in our pieces. You've got anything to add there? I was getting ready to sign off, but if you got something to add, I want to hear it. You always want to know the secrets of a national champion. Aha, tools to record with. And there is an important difference, Jim. Rehearsing versus practicing is different. You're right. And we'll talk about that in a future one. Recording are whatever tools you have. So if you have a phone, you have a voice memo app, you can record just the sound. If you have a camera on your phone, you can set it up and record your performance, so it's visual and audio. You can use iMovie. If you've ever done anything on Zoom, you can use your computer as a way. You can set up a private Zoom session where you record yourself for Zoom. And you just click the record button at the end of your session, it automatically saves that. Then your only issue is making sure that you do the file management to know where it is. So you have to label it. It'll just end up being called zoomed_0.mp4. So you have to rename whatever it is so that you can find it again for your comparison. Otherwise, it's not the most useful tool. But we do have a lot of tools available to us that we once didn't. And if what you're wanting to do is use, I encourage the video if you have the tools and the capability of doing that. Sometimes getting the angle of the camera to see your hands is the challenge. But like I'm going to move my computer. There's a FaceTime camera in this computer that could angle and see me. I'm using a separate webcam that's higher, that can also give that view better. So if you're able to do that, one of my friends for the Quarantine Festival was teaching hammer dulcimer, and she said her setup was a mic stand that involved some duct tape and some rubber bands to get her camera to stay up there, which is just I love it. It's creative. So that's what I have for us today. Come and join me again next week, same time. It's 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and translate that to whatever your time zone is, and this is archived here on the Facebook page of Dulcimer Crossing. It's also archived on the Dulcimer Crossing site in the live events page for premium members. And it's archived on YouTube and our Dulcimer Crossing channel, as well as our Vimeo channel. Thanks for being here. Bye.